Well, hello and welcome to today's A-Team Group webinar entitled The Future of Market Data, Harnessing Cloud and AI for Market Data Distribution and Consumption. My name is Mike O'Hara. Excuse me. I am an editorial contributor at A-Team Group and I'll be moderating today's webinar. So first of all, I'd like to quickly welcome our expert panel. We have on screen Peter Simpson, who is the product owner at OneTick. And joining us also is Shavara Srabian, head of e-trading product management at Jefferies, excuse me, and Tim Anderson, global head of Tick History Cloud Services at LSEG. So good afternoon all. I'll ask each of you to briefly introduce yourselves in a moment. But before we start, just some information for our audience on how you can take part in today's webinar. To the right of the video on your screen, you'll see a box for both questions and polls. We'll be running two polls during the webinar, so please do vote. It helps us to gauge what our audience are thinking. And I'll give you plenty of warning when the polls are coming up, so you can vote. If members of the audience would like to ask the panelists any questions, we will be looking at those throughout the webinar, and we'll be aiming to address as many of them as possible towards the end. So please feel free to ask your question to the box under the questions tab to the right of the video screen. And just a quick mention about some of our upcoming events and webinars. An event happening tomorrow in New York is the AI and Capital Markets Summit. So that's tomorrow. It's a very interesting topic. We'll be covering all kinds of things to do with AI and capital markets. And then a couple of webinars that are coming up. Best practices for managing trade surveillance on the 1st of July, and best approaches for trade and transaction reporting on the 11th of September. So that's what we got in the pipeline. So without further ado, let me hand over to our speakers to introduce themselves. And start with you, Shavara. Can you tell us maybe 30 seconds on who you are, what you do, and your interest in this topic?
Hi, my name is Shavara Srabian. I work at Jefferies in the trading and sales group at fixed income. My career started off in technology, so I have always been interested in technology and how to use that to drive businesses forward. But then as I started working in the investment banking or the trading arena, I started to see how that could really be leveraged by our systematic trading desk. So I moved to the desk for about 8 years and worked with them and trying to push that strategy forward. As everyone's seen, there's been such now excitement around technology that all of the desks now want to have more of a systematic approach. So I've centralized my role, and I now work with all of the trading desks to help them with their data and analytics.
Great, thanks, Shavara. Tim, quick intro from you.
Yes, hello, good morning or good afternoon, wherever you may be based. My name is Tim Anderson. I'm the head for Tick History and Quantity of Economic Data at the London Stock Exchange. I've been here for about 6 years now, obviously a data-driven role. Previous to that, I was working front office at Deutsche Bank and JP Morgan. Clearly, from a data perspective, AI has become to the forefront for all of our customers, and we're obviously providing a lot of advice and consultancy on how to use London Stock Exchange and other forms of data sets in the AI world. So very much looking forward today, and thanks for everybody for joining.
Thanks very much, Tim. And Peter.
Hi, I'm Peter Simpson, product person at OneTick. We cover tick analytics software and also kind of a market data on demand service. Our customers historically have taken our software and been doing that for 15 plus years. Now it's much more common to access kind of market data through kind of cloud access.
Great. Well, I look forward to hearing more about that, excuse me, as the discussion goes on. So first of all, before we go into the questions that we've got prepared and start the discussion, I'd like to run our first audience poll. And you'll see that on the right of your screen now. The question is, where's your organization in its cloud journey for market data infrastructure? You'll see there's 5 options there. No plans not started. early stage pilot, hybrid or on-prem with some cloud integration, mostly cloud-based and fully cloud native. So while the audience responds to that poll, maybe we can just start with a bit of an overview from a kind of strategic perspective. And I'd like to maybe start with you on this one, Peter. How are you seeing cloud and AI reshape market data strategy at the enterprise level? Are they rethinking their entire data operating model or just applying new tools to old processes?
Okay, let's start off with cloud and then get on to AI. On the cloud side, it's where does the firm add value? Now, as a maker of tick analytics software, historically, we've had to map to what customers have wanted. We've sold software to customers, which they would deploy on site, they would collect, store, manage, and then analyze that tick history, whether it's kind of real time, kind of stream processing through to looking kind of years back. Now, for exchange data, firms really don't have to do that. Now, if you're collecting Opera, that's around 2 terabytes of data a day. Even if you're just collecting US equities, that can be 100 gigabytes of data a day. All of this kind of exchange-driven data is largely commoditized. So we see our customers looking for kind of standard approaches to access the data and trying to avoid vendor lock-in. And realistically, if they can outsource these commoditized tasks, then they can focus on cost, latency, and analytics flexibility. Now, on the AI side, in relation to backtesting, our customers have been using kind of AI, whether you call it machine learning, for a very long time. What's more new is around LLM, so kind of natural language querying. So rather than providing a proprietary API of this is how you can access data, it's the customer now much more expects, how can I type in natural language, I want this data. And then from that base data, I want to run this analytic.
Right.
And that's what we have to continuously enhance as we move on.
Thank you. Tim, are you seeing kind of similar trends around how people are kind of adopting cloud and AI and so on?
Oh, absolutely. From all of our customers, from tier one all the way down to smaller hedge funds and research firms. The fundamental difference that we've seen, and it has been enabled by the cloud providers, is we carry close to 75 petabytes of market data. Customers no longer want to download the content. So what we do is we share it via cloud. So we store all that data in the 3 major cloud providers, Microsoft, Amazon, and Google, and we share it directly into a customer's instance. So that the data becomes on demand. So they have it instantaneously. And that's very necessary because the markets now are going to T+1. NYSE has talked about going to 23 hours of trading per day. There's just not the time to extract data anymore. So the sharing functionality is phenomenal. The other part is we include a query engine with that, whether that be BigQuery, Fabric, or S3 or Redshift. And with that, the customer can then mix their own content or other vendor data outside of LSEG and our data at the same time. And the AI power is fundamental here, because AI is great at bringing, as Peter mentioned, it's great for natural language querying. It's great for front office people to be able to query the data without having to tell a technical person to do it for them. But the other beauty is it does joins very well to unstructured data or data that's not similar to market data. So, and you can give it a rules of the road of how you might do that. So all of a sudden, you've got this system that's on demand and AI ready and has the ability to mix and match other data sets.
Yeah. And Shavara, I'd be interested to get your perspective on this as a practitioner and consumer of this data rather than a kind of distributor of it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's actually, I was going to piggyback off of some things that Peter said, just a different perspective on who the client is. So I'm working with the business, so the traders and salespeople as if they're our clients. So we try and align our strategy with them. I believe they used to think tech as more like a tool, and now and almost scared of it. and now I feel like everyone's excited about it and they're thinking of it as a partner. So we took some surveys here to see like how do you want to use the data going forward? What are you thinking about ML and AI to try and understand like where our tech strategy is going to go in the future? And at first it was just automating existing processes. That was probably what everyone first go to, and like they weren't thinking outside the box. But as we move towards giving them new analytics or new tools, their ideas have also grown. So there's been a really big focus on sharing so that ideas can cross-pollinate and they can start to use each other's ideas. And with that also comes the need for standardization and normalization of data. And that's where the cloud has become really important. And then the AI and model learning it's been automating mundane tasks. It's really been helping with research, summarizing. So now we're spending so much time trying to, be an expert in everything that they're responsible for. Now they can, an interesting fact, even like some of the teams have been moving away from Bloomberg chats into Teams, because they can ask, Copilot, can you just like tell me what's going on in my group chat, summarize everything I need to know for this today. And they're starting to utilize it as just part of their everyday work flow, which is nice. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you. So we're getting some responses into the first poll question. If we can bring those results up on the screen. So it looks like the majority of the audience, a fairly slim majority, is at the early stage pilot stage of migrating to the cloud for market data infrastructure, and then quite a large proportion as well have not started, and then fully cloud native only 6%. So do these results tie in with the panel's expectations? I mean, are any of you surprised by those results, or are they pretty predictable, do you think? Whoever wants to pick up on that.
It's very normal, because I think when cloud first came out, there was slow adoption by the firms because there's an element of risk in all of this. The technology is wonderful, it's very powerful, has great capabilities, but you can't just deploy it on your customers or into industry because there are certain regulations and compliance and so forth. But I think people have seen enough excitement and benefit and automation that it's definitely worth dipping your toe in the water and finding how to do things. Most certainly from an LSEG point of view, we're building analyst reports for customers, which used to take weeks to pull data from all different APIs and so forth, and they get done in 4 or 5 minutes now. The summarization, bringing all those different contexts together, doing the calculations on the data, and putting that into the actual summaries itself. It's extremely impressive of what it can do from an automation point of view.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there's probably quite a difference between firms who might be using a cloud for their market data infrastructure for kind of historical tick data versus real-time tick data. Two big differences there, and I'm sure we'll be drilling down into that a little more in the as we go through the discussion. So the second poll question that we've got, and again you should be able to see that on your screens, is around the main driver for AI adoption. So in fact, let's hold that for a second, because I just want to, we're going to be talking about AI a bit later on, but before we do, I'd like to maybe drill down a little bit more on what some of the biggest barriers are that firms encounter when they're migrating market data infrastructure to the cloud. And I'd like to start with you, Shavara, here, because obviously you've been through this process to an extent. You must have faced some challenges. What are the challenges, and how can they be overcome without compromising on things like latency, performance, or cost control?
Oh, thanks. Yeah. So as I was saying, we are moving towards like centralization, sharing, and moving all of our data to these like target locations in the cloud or wherever we decide. And also the business is getting excited and they're coming up with new ideas and they're pushing for them to happen. But as we migrate all the tech data and everything that we have to also move over, the time to market is is one thing that we have to factor in. Also, the amount of data that we're bringing in. It's great if we have it, but if we don't know about it, catalog it, understand it, then it's almost useless. So we have to find people that can do both, can really understand the tech piece of like onboarding the data, but then also how to help the users actually use it and how to use it the most efficiently. So the first question we always ask everyone is, how do you plan to use this data, and try and customize the solution for the need. And then, as you mentioned, cost control is a factor. It costs money to buy the data, it costs data to store the data, use the data. So we need to establish monitoring as part of everything that we do. Transparency. The market data team is overloaded with having to understand like the contracts, how we are allowed to use the data. So all of that plays a factor into our decisions around, like what data is onboarded and what we do with the data.
Right, and thank you. And Tim, are you seeing challenges that your customers are facing that are kind of aligned with that, or are you seeing other challenges?
No, absolutely. We see it where I call it pockets of cloud, where a firm will pick 3 or 4 systems, they move to the cloud. They do that, and then because there's still dependencies with data or systems on-prem, there's this constant push-pull of data egress, and it becomes very costly. They're spending a lot of compute trying to bring data down. So it needs very thorough planning to understand when you move a system to a cloud, that, what other dependencies, what other systems should that come with it at the same time, or is that not the right choice to do it? And you have to look at it holistically across the entire firm. Not just what systems are old or very expensive to be on-prem, and maybe that can get some cost savings in cloud. Because when you get into that hybrid mode, it can get very difficult managing 2 different environments, one cloud and one data center. So I would always suggest planning. However, in the last 2 to 3 years, I've seen phenomenal acceleration to the cloud from our customers, because they just want all the data all of the time, and for it to be on demand and available.
Yeah. And Peter, any further thoughts from you on barriers to migrating market data infrastructure to the cloud?
Well, we've seen projects which have failed. So they have typically been where customers have lifted and shifted an existing on-premise implementation into a cloud implementation. And realistically, they had the boxes before, they had all the infrastructure before, now they're paying for it again, and it's further away, and it's slower, and it's more costly. So I think it's the mindset. Is it just moving for location, or is it more around, what should I be doing in-house? What should I be outsourcing? What can I receive as a service? And then if I'm outsourcing, what are my requirements? And where projects tend to go wrong is where those requirements and objectives are unclear. So how is real-time data going to work? How is T+1? How is entitlement going to work? Where is compute going to run? Are you going to just be putting the data down from the cloud, or are you going to be running compute in the cloud? So it's being clear up front what your objectives are and where you're going, and just not trying to duplicate exactly what you have. Then it's more likely to be successful.
Excellent, thank you. So maybe we can go to the second poll now, which is all around the drivers for AI adoption. And the question, if we can bring the second poll up on the screen, please. And we will see the question. What is your organization's primary driver for adopting AI in market data operations? And you can see there are 5 options there. Should maybe have another one for if there's a primary driver that's not on that list. But anyway, let's see what the audience comes up with as we go through the next question, which is all about AI in practice. So start with you here, Tim. In what specific areas of the market data workflow, whether it's normalization, anomaly detection, usage optimization, where are you seeing AI or machine learning deliver the most tangible results? And what does it take to operationalize those models effectively?
Yeah. The first part to the question is, the data needs to be curated in a way that it's ready for AI. And what I mean by that is the first point that you made is it's normalized, so it's structured well. That the LLM understands what the fields are. So one thing that we do is when we use AI systems, we upload all of our metadata and the user guides that explains what the fields are. So if there's a natural language entry into the system, it fully understands that last underscore price is the last price of the day. And people tend to ask very broad questions when they use prompting. And you don't want the system to go, I don't know where that might be. I need to go through all of the data line by line by line. So we use concepts as chunking and embedding for the AI systems and clustering. So when you say Vodafone, it knows to go directly to Vodafone and not scan through the entire aspect. But where we've seen AI being most beneficial is when it's working with many data sets at one time, because the system understands where to go to get the data and how to bring it all together, how to do the calculations simultaneously, and then summarize it very, very neatly. That's where the great power is coming from. Whereas before you would need several people pulling data from several different sources, putting it into a repository somewhere, someone then going through it and then doing the business intelligence on it, and then doing the summarization. So speed is the number one thing.
And I guess the rise of agentic AI is helping in that regard in terms of going to different places for different types of data and then deciding what to do with it, because it's kind of
and you get this beautiful nirvana of when you used to use structured query language, you'd be querying for a particular result. The beauty of natural language is you can ask what if questions. Tell me about a time when, what if I did this as a trading strategy? Tell me if inflation went to 7% or 9%, what would the impact be? And then you get very intelligent responses back to those types of questions.
Yeah. And Shivara, do you have thoughts in terms of the where in the market data workflow AI is delivering tangible results?
I actually was going to say, I totally agree with what Tim just said. So with the market data workflow specifically, I think it's best utilized, or the way that we find it most helpful is with the data quality, because we have such a dependency now on machine learning in our models for driving business insights and decisions. We need our data quality to be perfect. So the more AI can help us with that, the better. But also, as he was saying, the models, the way we use tech and how the tech and quants and traders and business all collaborate is what is really interesting. So how they can use AI to take, you could say, like, let me look at all of the vendor prices that we're getting and price this bond, and it will do it, because they will do exactly what you say. But as they collaborate more and they're like, oh, but you should take into account macro factors, or you should take into account earnings announcements and different things like that. And as they add these features and using AI to determine really quickly, like, what is having an impact and what's not, is driving business decisions and profitability. So that's what's really interesting.
Excellent, thank you. So I expect that the audience have had time to vote in the poll that we ran. So could we bring the poll results up on screen, please? Okay, so it looks like improved speed and efficiency and competitive pressure and innovation strategy are the main drivers for adopting AI in market data operations. Again, any surprises there? Anything that you expected to see that we're not seeing? Any of you?
I would say the cost reduction one, it doesn't, like, when you start to use AI, you have this sense that it's going to cost you more, and it is. But there is an indirect cost reduction from time efficiencies that are gained from AI. So you got to balance that one out. You will be spending more with cloud providers and with AI companies, but you likely will be spending less in time.
Great, thank you. So I'd like to move on now to the topic of latency and location and so on. So Peter, with real-time market data, obviously deterministic low latency is essential. You need to know, how much your latency is going to be, and you want it to be as short as possible. So how do you go about balancing the benefits of cloud elasticity with the physical constraints of data center proximity and network performance?
It's really splitting it into two. We provide access to real-time data across equities, futures, and some options. If I look at the flow coming through now, it's probably a quarter of what it was mid-April when markets just went completely nuts.
Mm-hmm.
If we rely on cloud elasticity, then there's a delay in new compute coming up. So from a collection and loading perspective, we just have to have that capacity ready. And we are continuously trying to optimize our latency by making sure that every CPU that's processing data isn't overstressed and that there is capacity to handle these peaks.
Mm-hmm.
Now, once the data is loaded, we can then separate the compute. So different customers can be running on different compute nodes, and they can define a minimum capacity and a maximum capacity and expand. Now, if someone wants incredibly low latency, they're always going to be in a colo location. But if they're wanting low latency, so small numbers of milliseconds for analysis purposes, then cloud is very viable. It's just around making sure that you have the fixed capacity to not drop any data and ensure that the latency you provide on every instrument is as small as possible. And then there's this continuous monitoring process to make sure that you're always monitoring what's happening. And if there's a spike, you can investigate and then resolve that.
Yeah. And Tim, I would imagine that LSEG, you've got customers at all points on the latency spectrum, correct? From the real kind of HFTs and low latency traders through to the people who are less latency sensitive. Are you finding that their requirements around cloud are vastly different?
Certainly as Peter mentioned, for the ultra low latency HFT, it's still infrastructure. It's feeds into data centers for that type of trading. But what we're doing now with the cloud providers, we are streaming full tick real time into tables in the cloud. So and the customers are querying what's happening right now. They're executing trades off that. The other part now is they're using things like Vertex and Bedrock on real time data that's been written directly into tables. So AI is not just for historical batches. It is absolutely can be used in the streaming context as well.
Yeah.
And is much more adaptable than, say, a very hard-coded algorithm that's executing trades. AI can adapt in a much more fluid and natural way.
Mm-hmm. Do you have anything you'd like to add to that, Shavara?
I mean, we think about a lot of the same things. We've implemented a hybrid model here due to, it's like things like high frequency trading, our nearest data centers in North Carolina does about 8 millisecond standard delay off the bat. So that's not going to work for example, the guys that trade treasuries. So they need to be co-located with the exchange. But for reference data or static or, these huge amounts of data that doesn't matter, then we utilize the cloud. So we're always just kind of thinking about how are we going to use the data and how important is latency.
Great. I'd like to stay with you for the moment, Shavara, as we look at the area of data quality and governance. With firms, I guess, moving to more distributed and AI-enhanced data architectures, how do you go about ensuring that the data quality, the lineage, entitlements, and such like are maintained across these kind of fragmented environments?
I mean, we spend so much time thinking about this. It's so difficult and tricky because you want data accessible. You want everyone to have be able to find exactly what they need to not be a blocker for anyone else that's trying to implement a new strategy or a new analytic. But at the same time, every piece of data that we purchase comes with contractual restraints. And also we have client information that, is privileged for some people and not others. And we also have just, corporate information. And so we have to kind of find a balance between centralization and making it easy to use, and also making sure that at every stage, just it's mandatory that entitlements go along with it, as well as monitoring and some sort of way to do data integrity. Otherwise, it's not going to be successful.
Yeah. And Peter, is this something you guys have cracked?
It's something that's ongoing. There may be these fragmented pools of data, but we need to consolidate them together. And especially with entitlement, we find there are IT teams saying, well, we'll just take this data from, let's say, a real-time market data feed, we'll publish it to a Kafka topic, and then people will then subscribe to it. And then you think, well, hang on, you've just dropped any need for entitlement. So how are you going to let the exchange know who's accessing that data? So it's having to always have entitlement in mind, which means we always have to have that check. And if we're providing access to historical data, we want to centralize the usage. If we go back in time, we used to provide access on a venue by venue basis. So let's say you could access all of Euronext. Now, a customer may only want to access 100 symbols. So you either have to then permission them to those 100 symbols, or you have to consolidate back what they accessed. And that kind of centralized reporting across potentially 20 different environments is what's necessary, so you can produce both correct entitlement and effective usage reporting. And I think that moves the model from kind of monolithic pricing to more kind of usage-based pricing on what they actually accessed.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, and I guess it's one of the challenges of AI generally is around, the ownership of the data that's going into the model, right? Who's I mean, and this when you talk about AI for like music or art or the large language models that are on the web, there's a big question about, okay, there's all this data that's kind of going into the model, so
and it can be more complex in when does the data go into the model? Is the model classed as a display user or a non-display user? So it's unfortunately, that seems to be on an exchange by exchange basis, exactly what the exchange defines.
Yeah.
That's why we keep our market data teams busy.
Indeed. So coming to you, Tim, if we look at things from a kind of regulatory standpoint, obviously both cloud and AI come with compliance and auditability challenges. What can you advise as being some of the best practices around ensuring transparency and control for regulators in the kind of regulatory landscape?
Yeah, I mean, the cloud certainly has helped with things like data retention, because when you're in a compliance situation of having to retain all data for 6 or 7 years, depending on locality, many firms would archive that types of things off to tape, and because it just couldn't sit on-demand hard drives. Then there'd be some trade surveillance event, and they would need to pull out a trade from 6 years ago, and no one can find it on the tape discs, and it takes 30 days for someone to deliver something. The beauty of cloud is because there's literally infinite storage and elasticity. You can keep all that in the cloud, and you can either have it on demand or in cold storage. Just different price points. So we've certainly found that very different. The other part in terms of regulatory trade surveillance and things like that is compliance. Internal compliance and external compliance can use AI to work in a much faster sense, to find those needles in the haystack. Whereas before it was very, very difficult because you had to write very prescriptive queries to find those types of anomalies. So it certainly has helped on both sides of the fence, internally and externally. The other part is like things like for the Volcker rule, you have to do very specific metric reporting. Cloud with infinite compute and infinite storage, it's much easier to do that, and to produce those metrics and then build commentary around the output of those metrics.
Yeah, gotcha. So we're getting some questions coming in from the audience here, and rather than save them all to the end, I think it might be an idea to try and address a couple of these now. So one that's come up for level 1 market data. Do you see a model in which we have seen a snapshot versus delta updates merged for simplicity into an updated payload? Actually, can we get this question up on screen? Is that possible? Because it's quite a complicated question. For level 1 market data, do you see a model in which we have seen snapshot versus delta updates merged for simplicity into an update payload, indicating which side changes, simplifying client work so they don't need to consolidate two-way from updates? I'm not sure I understand that question, but then I'm not the market data expert. So would any of you like to try and address that one?
Yeah, from my understanding of the question, it's referring to when you have resiliency in your network, you're capturing from 2 different endpoints from the exchange, and then those are merged together. One thing we do at LSEG, we have 2 different versions of our market data. One being PCAP, where we literally record from a packet level directly at the exchange, so you don't have that particular issue. And the other one for our normalized tick history data, yes, it's not quite at the exchange, but we have very enhanced algorithms and timestamping alignment with GPS, which brings all that together. So you don't see those anomalies or those slight fractions of latency out if it's failover between 2 endpoints.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if Peter might want to add some more to that, because he may have interpreted the question slightly differently.
I think I interpret it more broadly on there is the base data coming through, and then how you can add value to that data by enriching it. And obviously that can be enriched on a T+1 basis, but it can also be enriched as the real-time data comes through. Now, the enrichment side is debatable whether that should be a separate stream or the same stream. If it's the same stream, then you're adding latency. If it's a separate stream, then you have more flexibility. So it's this kind of balance point between how many additional fields you add to a data set and then how fast you can make that delivery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anything you'd like to add there, Shavara, or do you think the guys have covered it?
I know. I feel like we all had slightly different interpretations of that question. But yeah, similar to what they both said, we always have to make decisions around if we want to store the raw data, or if we want to enrich it or make it easier for people to consume on the when they're reading it back, because sometimes data isn't so easy in its raw form. And we end up usually doing both. We end up usually storing the raw, so we always have it and can audit purposes and go back. And then depending on the use case, we'll create like custom solutions, whether it's enriching it with other data or some sort of interpretation of it where, like trying to make a market, like if there is a buy side and a sell side, like merging that into a market for whoever's consuming it.
Yeah, thank you. Just do one more of these audience questions. We're starting to experiment with cloud for historical data storage, but real-time data remains on-prem. It goes back to what you were all saying before. How are others managing this hybrid setup, and what are the trade-offs? Any of you like to add anything to? I know we kind of did talk about this a little earlier, but can we talk specifically of trade-offs between kind of real-time and historic, cloud and on-prem, and so on? Any of you like to pick up on that?
Yeah, I think as Peter and myself alluded to before, is the nervousness of real-time running through cloud is obviously latency, and potential to drop packets. And as we've seen for LSEG, the last 6 months, we've seen a 70% increase in real-time messaging. So, can we trust that if you're streaming real-time through a cloud provider, that you are going to be capturing everything, and you may not know that you haven't captured something? There may have been a drop packet and you don't find that out too much later. But there is certainly, we're doing a lot of testing with a lot of very interesting, innovative customers on real-time through the cloud, and for the most part, it's been very, very successful and a lot more cost competitive.
Yeah.
But we're not quite there yet. And I'll let Shavara or Peter might add some more to that as well.
I'll start. So if you are getting real-time data through the cloud and we see that there is a latency issue, we increase the instance size. And within a couple of minutes, we now have more capacity. What we found with some customers is they are running their collection on boxes which they installed 5 years ago. And during that period, throughput has gone up probably 10 times. So cloud actually makes it easier to minimize your latency. You won't get tiny, where you really have to be on top of it at a colo location, but it can make it easier. Now, in this hybrid approach, that's fine and very valid as long as it's the same types of data. Where things tend to go wrong is where they'll have one source of data for history and a different provider for real time. And they may have different symbologies, different codes for trade conditions, and that whole matching together becomes a mess. And ideally, you want to write the same analytics for what's happening now to what happened intraday to what happened a year ago. So just make sure it's the same data.
Yeah, consistent. Yeah.
Just to add one small point to that is one benefit of cloud is you can absolutely stitch real-time and historic data together.
Yeah.
So you can write a query about what's happening right now and go back five days. When you do it separately, it can get a little fiddly to join those two together.
Yeah, indeed. Can we talk for a couple of minutes about the kind of economic models around cloud? How are cost models changing in the cloud era, I guess you'd call it? Are we seeing a shift from traditional licensing to more usage-based? I think you mentioned this before, Peter. It might have been you, Tim, not sure. But one of you mentioned about usage-based pricing or value-based pricing even for market data solutions. Is that the way we're heading? Is that the trend? Peter?
Yeah, we're definitely seeing that. We've actually changed how our pricing works. Historically, where we were mostly delivering files, it was a customer paid for a set of data, like show me LSC or show me Zetra, or just give me kind of nicely tagged data. Now we end up with two components, a cost for the data, and that data is a lot more configurable than before. So what markets, what symbols, what depth level, what time period, is it real time or delayed or just historic? And then a cost for the compute. We tend to see this evolutionary model where someone might start off saying, I just want the data. And then they suddenly realize after a couple of weeks, they've got terabytes of data that they've downloaded, which they then have to manage. And obviously, they then have to work on corporate actions or continuous contracts and role definitions if they're looking at futures. So the compute model starts to come in. And in that, the customer is defining how much compute they want to run. So how many CPUs are running at a base period and a maximum? Do they want elastic compute? And it's going to be much more efficient to do that analytics as close to the data sitting in the cloud rather than pulling all this data down and then doing the analytics locally, where suddenly you get this massive data transport latency. So that kind of model of both data and compute is kind of where we're seeing everything we do now.
We did a very extensive analysis on cloud versus on-prem, and this is for historical data only, where we drilled down to rack space and cabling, air conditioning, redundant power supplies, and we got it down to $1 amount per gigabyte. I know it's mostly a UK audience, but it was $110 per gigabyte of data stored in a data center and $4 stored in the cloud. So in our case, when you're talking 70 plus petabytes, that's a significant saving that you can do in the cloud, particularly when it comes to market data. Other data sets, not so much because they're a lot smaller, but certainly with market data. So with those types of savings, we've noticed that there's been a shift, and because shift in customers saying, let's spend less on infrastructure and spend more on procuring more data. And it's enabled them to get into more markets to trade with, and lowered their TCO significantly. So that's one huge, massive benefit of cloud.
Tim, I'd be interested to get your thoughts on the kind of the whole integration issue of with data consumption becoming more modular and more real time. How are firms, or how could or how should firms think about integrating their cloud native data services with some of these legacy on-prem systems that are still running, and also third-party platforms that may or may not be on the cloud?
Yeah, I mean, I feel for the older firms who have been around a long time, who are dealing with a very robust data center strategy with many of their legacy systems which are working perfectly, and a lot of new providers coming to the market with market data saying, "Hey, we only provide it through X cloud," and they feel they've now got to work in this, interoperate in this world. And then comes AI, where it's very difficult to procure AI hardware in data centers at this point in time. So that you have to really do it through a cloud provider to get that functionality. So it's a very, very precise balancing act between those two systems. And in saying that, there are a lot of smaller hedge funds coming directly to us saying, we just want to be cloud because we can switch it on and off as, overnight. And we've seen some very successful firms without any support or IT infrastructure people in their own firms running directly off the cloud. And they're consuming our content from our cloud. So they're not paying for the storage. We're hosting it all for them. And they're literally running off with just people who are front office buy side.
Yeah. Shavara or Peter, either of you have any thoughts regarding the whole kind of integration with the cloud and more legacy systems?
I mean, we're feeling the pain that Tim just described and Peter kind of alluded to as well, which is we're really trying to move to the cloud, and we have this idea of what our perfect data workflow will be. But at the same time, we have all of these legacy applications, and it takes so much time. It's in order to see the cost savings that we're projecting actually come to fruition is a lot longer than anticipated, because it's just the migration just takes so long.
Yeah. And maybe we can pick up on an audience question on that topic, which is, what lessons have you learned from running market data workloads in the cloud that you wish you'd known from the start? I don't know if you want to pick up on that, Shavara, because you've obviously been through this from a practitioner perspective. What did you wish you'd known at the start?
I feel like, when we started, there was no plan, there was no structure, and so it was just, if someone asked for data, we'd onboard it. We could be onboarding the same data multiple times in multiple places with different names, different fields, and now I just wish, like, from the beginning we had thought about how to just standardize it, and maybe not cloud if it wasn't around, but like just in general, like how to catalog, normalize it, store it, and centralize it, so that it's not trying to unwind like a huge ball as we are now. It would have been nice.
Yeah.
To have that foresight of how important data would be. Yeah,
indeed. Peter, any kind of lessons learned or things that your client might not have expected at the start?
Pretty similar. It's don't jump in. We have seen particular kind of quants on desks saying, we have this massive Snowflake project, or we're using BigQuery, or they've got all their pet project. And then they're asking us, well, how can we integrate in that? Rather than stepping back and actually, what are your analytical requirements? So you're getting data from these sources. What symbologies are you going to be using? Are you going to be, if you're looking at equities, are you going to be applying corporate actions, and how are you going to be applying them? If you're looking at futures, how are you defining how roles would work? How are you looking at market holidays? And basically understanding the types of data that you'll access, then understanding the compute environment that you need to do that, and does that compute environment support? Like, if you're joining trades and quotes together, you'll need an as of join. does the environment that the cloud environment you chosen do that, or are you just pulling all this data out to do it locally in pandas? So it's stepping back a bit and planning, defining your requirements, and then working from that. And all of that then links into the security model of how do you authenticate, how is access control done, how is entitlement done, making sure we have that kind of full audit record.
Thank you. We have a question, an audience question around operational resilience, and how does DORA apply for designating data vendors as providing critical services apply to the cloud services? So thoughts around DORA, which is the Operational Resilience Act in Europe, and how it applies to cloud and market data. What are the issues there? Tim, would you like to pick up on that?
I might pass that one to Peter, being New York based.
Yeah. Has DORA come up on your radar, Peter?
It has, less on the real-time side, more on our kind of surveillance customers, where we need to make sure that there is a fully resilient environment. And depending on the customer, they have different definitions of what that means in terms of high availability in DR. Is that multiple availability zones within the same region? Is it different regions? And it tends to be kind of a sliding scale of cost of what cost they're happy with to satisfy their interpretation of the regulation. Obviously, when you get to more real-time data, then the kind of requirements ramp up.
Yeah. Is DORA something that's on your radar at all, Shavara, or is it not really apply to you guys?
Yeah, I'm not really familiar with that.
Okay, fine. So let's. I mean, we're coming towards the end of the hour. I'd like to spend the last few minutes, kind of looking ahead, really. So, if we look 1 year, 3 year, 5 years ahead, what do you think might be one? If you could highlight kind of one innovation or structural change that you think will fundamentally redefine how market data is distributed or consumed, what might that be? And I know this is a bit of a kind of crystal ball territory, but where are the interesting innovations happening? Start with you, Shavara.
Okay, so we've even just this year, we've just seen such an uptick in ask for data. It seems like every day somebody wants a new piece of data that they've heard of. With that, I think there is a lot of money made, and a lot of the data costs are really high to onboard. But as everyone else is also asking for more data, I think that there's going to be more providers in the space, and the market data vendors are really going to have to distinguish themselves as to why their data is superior. So I think there's a few ways that they might try and do that. One, cost coming down. I think it's still going up, but I think at some point it's going to reach a tipping point, and hopefully as the space gets more crowded, the cost will come down. Also, I think instead of just delivering raw data, vendors are trying to show how they can provide smarter data, or data that is providing the insights that you're doing internally. Now, you don't want to completely commoditize that, because then, if you're selling the same smart data to us as to someone else, then how are we going to have an advantage? But to a certain point, I think it will start to happen more. And then last, how can you distinguish yourself about data quality? There's SLAs now where we'll say, if you don't deliver data by whatever time, but it doesn't feel like it's very enforced, or if there's something wrong with the data, there's any sort of consequence. I think how well your data is maintained, and how much people can rely on it to be accurate is also going to be really important.
Thank you. Tim, what do you see in your crystal ball?
I do not say this without for effect, but I've never seen anything like AI is doing now to data in my entire career, and that includes the internet. it will change everything. You will not recognize the landscape in 2 to 5 years. And with that said, my advice is to prepare for that all data should be AIified. And what I mean by that is it's structured in a manner that LLMs can use the content in the most efficient way possible. Because I have seen firms apply AI to data and it takes 45 minutes for a basic response to come back. Just be prepared to start planning for that, for the cloud elements and for the AI elements, because the things that we've done internally with AI and the types of reporting that we've done on content, I cannot describe how impressive that it is, and it's only going to get better. And every week from all the providers, I think Shivara and Peter will say the same, there's updates coming from these companies every single day of the week. The rate of change is very, very rapid.
Last word to you, Peter.
Okay, well, a few kind of sound bites. So more cloud, less on-premise, more data format standardization. So where every kind of provider used to have their own format and API for accessing it, now it's pretty much Parquet to store market data. The opposite side of that is more compute framework fragmentation. Could we end up with different fiefdoms, all doing things slightly different way, and a lot more kind of natural language processing. So rather than having to learn a proprietary API to access data, just having a conversation, typing in, I want to access this data of this type, and then something comes back, and then you keep iterating by, again, writing English.
Yeah. And I mean, just to add my own 10 cents to that, I think that the standardization is a really important element, Peter, and I think we'll see more of the likes of MCP, Model Control Protocol, which kind of allows these AI agents to, it gives a kind of standardized way of large language models accessing data for applications. So I think we'll see that will play a much greater part. That's my prediction.
We actually see on the LLM side more of a closed loop in our documentation. Historically, we'd write documentation and send it out the door. Now that's kind of changed, where the documentation is the basis for what the LLM learns. We then monitor how people write their kind of queries, so write their questions in and what the LLM came back with. And then you go, okay, that answer is bad. That's because the documentation is incomplete, or we don't have an example in that area.
Yeah.
So I think AI and LLM specifically have been a big driver for how we change our documentation.
Yeah, interesting. Great. Well, I think that's pretty much all we've got time for. So thanks all of you for a really interesting and informative discussion there. And special thanks to LSEG Data and Analytics and to OneTick for sponsoring today's webinar. So just before we leave, a quick recap of some of the events that we've got coming up. As I mentioned earlier, tomorrow in New York, there's the AI and Capital Markets Summit. So that'd be a good one to get along to if you're in New York City. And then a couple of webinars, best practices for managing trade surveillance and best approaches for trade and transaction reporting. So if you want to find out more about those events, if you go to the ateam.com/events page on the website with full details there, and you can register and so on. So that's it today. So thanks, Shivara, thanks, Tim, and thanks, Peter. You've all provided some great insights there. And thank you to the audience for joining us today and participating with your votes in the polls and the questions. Just one last request, if you could please complete our feedback form, as we're always very keen to hear back from our webinar participants and hear your views, which always helps us improve our products and services. So once again, thanks everyone, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.